a regular event that we host here, usually at the Kigali Public Library. It's a means of building a literary community in Kigali, of bringing amazing authors to Kigali to interact with you, with emerging writers from Rwanda, and really to strengthen Rwanda's presence as a part of the broader Pan-African literary community. So you are here, you are a part of something really, really special. And so I hope you are excited, as we are excited to have you here this evening. I know there was rain for about 30 minutes. And once I saw the rain, I said, no one is coming. Because we know Kigali stops when it starts raining. But I'm really excited that everyone is here to see a very, very amazing author we're going to introduce to you shortly. But I want to make sure you know what Kigali Lit is. A lot of you are very new. I don't know all of these faces, so that means you haven't been here before. Who is new? Who is here for the very first time? Wow, amazing. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining the Kigali Lit family. So Kigali Lit is an event that's brought to you by the Goethe Institute, who are doing this in conjunction with Huza Press. Huza is Rwanda's first fiction publishing house. They run a short story competition and have published a number of anthologies by Rwandan authors, which you'll be able to buy from one of those tables in the back before you leave here today. So I'm actually going to call up the founder, director, boss lady, head of all things from Huza Press. This is Louise Umatoni. Louise is the founder, as I said, of Huza Press, and I am very amazed that she continues to do this while having a myriad of other jobs and responsibilities in her life. But this is Huza's third year, right? Fourth. So Huza, we launched in 2015, and here we are in 2019 together, still going strong. So let's give Louise a little round of applause, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Huza Press and why we are here.
Thank you, Donnalee. I should also say that she moderated our launch event. I see quite a number of familiar faces, people who have been part of the Huza journey. Dada, waving at you. Marianne, waving. People who supported in the sidelines, chair waving at you. But I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for being with us here this evening. Like Donnalee has mentioned, Kigali Lit has been going on for some time now. We've had some amazing writers come in from across the continent. We recently had Billy Kahora. We've had Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, who you probably all know, the author of Kintu. And this evening we're excited to have Lola Shoneyin. Lola, smile and wave. Lola is the author of a fantastic book called The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. I don't know if you've read it, but I think it was one of our favorite for our book club. And there's quite a number of plays that have been created based on this book, which is exciting. And we're excited that we have Lola here to discuss this with us. So maybe just a little bit why we're doing this as part of why we're doing this weekend. So this event is part of the Ubuntu Festival. So Huza Press, the Goethe Institute, and Spoken Word Rwanda decided to partner with Ubuntu to be able to expand the festival by adding a literary component to it. So the festival has been ongoing for quite a while now. I think this is their 4th year as well, their 5th year. And with this year, the theme is around breaking down barriers and walls. So we're excited because what Lola's book does for us is engage with those societal perceptions, those walls that we build in our minds. And, she sort of tries to tear those down or actually address them. So we're excited that this book is one that we'll be discussing this evening. So I won't keep going with all of these different bits of information. I'll let Lola and Donnalee start the conversation, and hopefully you'll all enjoy it. It's a funny book, so I'm looking forward to lots of laughter this evening. All right, Lola, I want to welcome you to come up.
So we're going to let Lola get settled. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Lola is. But before I allow her to speak, so I'm going to ask you to just tell us whatever it is you would love us to know about Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is ongoing. So this is a side event of the festival, but we're also having another event with them tomorrow at 2 p.m. where Lola will also be present. And there are other events going on as a part of this. So I want to make sure we have all the information from our lovely partners at Ubuntu. And so Danny's going to give us a brief summary Of what we should know. So I feel lots of luxury to just pick on him right now. Are you ready? Have you thought of what to say? Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Daniel Rugamba, and I'm here as part of Umuntu Arts Festival. As she mentioned, Umuntu is happening for the 5th year, and the theme is when the walls break down, truth. That is why, in line of this edition, we have hosted different events, and now we have partnered with Kigali Lit to also host Lola Shoneyin. Also, there is, because the festival goes on for 3 days at the memorial, this is the 2nd day of the festival, and we have different performances lined up. And also, as part of that, we have workshops that happen from 2 to 4, while the performances start from 6 to around 10. It's a free event, it's a free festival, and we would like you to find any way that you can contribute so that we can keep it free for everybody and also world class for everyone. Thank you so much.
That was so good for an impromptu presentation. Thank you so much, Danny. So now that we've gotten the pleasantries out of the way, I want us to focus on the star that is here with us this evening, our guest of honor. I truly don't think she needs much of an introduction, because if you came to an event called An Evening with Lola Shoneyin, you probably know who Lola Shoneyin is. Nevertheless, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then she is going to actually start us off with a reading from her most popular work, The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. So Lola Shoneyin's work includes 3 books of poems, So All the Time I Was Sitting on an Egg, Song of a River Bird, and For the Love of Flight. It also includes several children's books, and we'll talk later about future books that she's working on for children. Her debut novel, The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives, was nominated for the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2010, went on to win the 2011 Josephine Miles Literary Award and the 2011 Ken Saro-Wiwa Prose Prize. Her children's book, Mayowa and the Masquerades, won the 2011 Atiku Abubakar Prize for Children's Literature in Nigeria. Lola Shoneyin's writing has appeared in many international publications, such as the Iowa Review, Chimurenga, Poetry International, Orbis Magazine, and The Guardian. In 2012, she founded the Book Buzz Foundation, a charity that identifies and develops innovative ways of promoting literacy and reading through the creation of reading spaces. She is the director of the Ake Arts and Book Festival, an annual literary and cultural event that supports and celebrates artistic and cultural innovation in Africa on African soil. She's also the creative director of the new Kaduna Book and Arts Festival, which takes place in Kaduna State, Nigeria. She also, in 2016, founded Wida Books and has developed a reputation for publishing very exciting literature here on the continent. Her work explores womanhood, sexuality, and the intricacies of domestic life. She's currently working on another novel, a new collection of poems, and a series of children's books, and she currently resides in Lagos. Let us give a warm welcome to a very hardworking woman, Lola Shoneyin. So we're going to start off actually with a reading, and I asked her to pick whichever passage she wants to read, so I'm excited to hear what you think we should hear from your work tonight.
Thank you, Donnalee, and thank you all for coming. Thank you to the Goethe Institute, to Huza Press, and the great people behind Kigali Lit. It's an honor to be here. So it's always interesting when you're asked to read an excerpt or a piece from your book, because these things are difficult to do without providing a bit of context.
You can give us context.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a bit of background. So this novel is set in Ibadan, which is in Oyo State, Nigeria. And it's about a man, a wealthy man, middle-aged, not particularly educated, or not educated, basically. And he has 3 wives, and they've given him 7 children. So we are now going to hear from Donnalee, the 4th wife that he marries. But there's something quite special and different about Donnalee, and it's that she's a university graduate. So this is Donnalee's voice. I didn't just happen upon this room. I dreamt of the pale green walls before I arrived. Now, the built-in wardrobe is mine, and so is the ceiling fan. My window looks over a backyard with patchy but neatly trimmed grass. Damp clothes flap in the evening breeze and perfume the air with detergent. On the back wall, an iron drum is darkened from burnt refuse. A tap juts from the grass and a weathered concrete slab lies beneath it. It's not a perfect view, but it is mine. There are no flowers or trees, no fields, no rolling hills, just a vegetable patch where Iyafemi cultivates joss peppers. I know that smell well. My mother used to cut them into fried eggs whenever she fell pregnant. The aroma from the frying pan would keep the rest of us on the cusp of a sneeze. Then one day, as Mama sat in the front yard, wrinkling her nose, the babies would leak down her leg. Who could blame them? Maybe they heard her relentless nagging and decided it was better to be born unformed. I must have covered my ears when I was in her womb, or perhaps she was quieter then. Don't get me wrong, I didn't only come here to get away from my mother. I came to escape the feeling of filth that followed me. If I stayed at home, I knew the day would come when Mama would open my bedroom door and find pools of blood at my wrists. After everything happened, I tried hard to continue being myself, but I slowly disappeared. I became Donnalee, the soiled, damaged woman. Except that was hard too, because Mama kept trying to make me do all the things the old Donnalee would have done. Don't you think you should get a job, Donnalee? Won't you apply for this bank job in the newspapers, Donnalee? Didn't you see the handsome boy that was looking at you, Donnalee? How could I tell her that I'd failed to preserve my dignity, that I was too ashamed to let her see the fickle shell that I'd become? Inevitably, it became unbearable. The more she pushed, the more I resisted. I didn't want a job. I didn't want a white wedding. I just wanted the war between who I used to be and who I'd become to end. I didn't want to fight anymore. Is that all right? I was going to read a little.
No, keep going, keep going.
Somehow, it all made sense when I met Baba Segi. At last, I would be able to empty myself of my sorrow. I would be with a man who accepted me, one who didn't ask questions or find my quietness unsettling. I knew Baba Segi wouldn't be like younger men who demanded explanations for the faraway look in my eye. Baba Segi was content when I said nothing. So yes, I chose this home, not for the monthly allowance, not for the lace skirt suits, and not for the coral bracelets. Those things mean nothing to me. I chose this family to regain my life, to heal in anonymity. And when you choose a family, you stay with them. You stay with your husband even when your friends call him a polygamist ogre. You stay with him when your mother says he's an overfed orangutan. You look at him in another light and see a large but kindly, generous soul. After I first met him, I told my sister Lara that I'd found the perfect man for me.
You want to marry a polygamist and be a part of a big, ugly family. Mama will go crazy. When will you tell her? She cackled. She knew that for once it would be me on the receiving end of Mama's exasperation. Soon, I said.
Mama's reaction was predictable. She listened impatiently to my intentions and then said she would like to claw out the eyes of this man who had misled me. Just to hear him wail, she added. When she saw that I was unmoved, she tried her unique brand of persuasion. Your future will be futile and uninteresting, she said. Polygamy is for gold diggers and bush dwellers, not educated children brought up in a good Christian home. I thought this was funny because we'd never been churchgoers. Mama said it was shameful for a woman to go to church without her husband, and Daddy said Sundays were supposed to be days of rest, as the Bible itself stipulated. By the time Mama was wailing about me embarrassing my bloodline, I was daydreaming about the peace that I would have in my husband's house.
Can you give some snaps, some claps? Whew, I've actually read this book and I still felt so into the story as if it was something new. I want to talk a bit about the journey of this book, but I actually want to check first. Is there an audio version of this book?
Not yet. I want to do it.
Please do. That's why I asked that question, because the way you were so animated in taking on all those characters, I really felt like I was listening to, something on Audible. So
Thank you so much.
So we heard it here first that the audiobook is coming, and Lola herself is going to be doing all the voices of all the characters. So the book is called The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. And I wonder now, you were very clear to tell us that you're taking on Donnaalee's character as you're reading that. Was there a particular wife in the story that was you? Was there someone that was telling your story?
I think there was a bit of me in all the characters.
I knew you were going to give that very diplomatic answer. That doesn't tell
know.
us the real secret.
The truth is that it's impossible to create a character that doesn't have bits of you in it. That's how the characters are well formed. They have to have a considerable dose of humanity. So you've got the humanity that you're confronted with as you move around on your personal journey. But a lot of what you write actually comes from within. It's what you've internalized. It's what you've swallowed. So as such, when you're writing a character and you're sometimes maybe trying to create dialogue, you've got to go and pull it out from somewhere. And a lot of the time that place is your brain. So there is a piece of me, I think, in all of them. All those women, those wives, have certain parts of Lola Shoneyin. So, I mean, the easy one is the one everybody loves to hate, Iya Femi, who's the crazy, Christian woman. And but she's very vengeful. And I think there have been times in my life where I've thought of myself as perhaps a vengeful person. So, yeah, I didn't have to travel too far to create that character. Yeah.
So something that's intriguing to me about you, and something I've seen others comment on as well, is your willingness to really take on taboo topics. You are very, I think, intentional about actually stepping into that space. So you're talking about polygamy, you're talking about rape, you're dealing with lots of issues around women's sexuality that from other writers we've heard, even in this Kigali Lit forum, we've heard other writers talk about their own fears that, when they want to talk about those things, they're fearful of what people who know them in real life will assume about them based on what they say about sex, for example, in a book. What has allowed you to be so bold and forthright with discussing those topics?
Thank you for that question. I think it's empathy. I think ultimately, I could spin you a tale about how driven, I am because I heard something here or there, but it's actually just empathy. It's reading something and just being horrified about the experience that an individual has had as a result of perhaps being gay. You know, I mean, it's not something that I find easy to understand. I don't understand that sort of hostility based on something that's innate. So that's always been my approach to things. I don't make a concerted effort to address taboo topics, but I am fearless in the way that I take them on. So apart from the empathy, I think a lot of it is also my own privilege. The fact that I was born into a certain family, I have a certain degree of education, I have a certain degree of exposure, perhaps, you know, having lived outside Nigeria for some time. So people have expectations of me, and I just try my best not to disappoint them. You know, when it comes to be generally outspoken, doing the mostest, you know, when it comes to, you know, saying the unsayable. The fact that I've lived a certain life gives me a bit of a license to be able to say those things. So I just take full advantage of it, because ultimately I believe that it's a struggle for those who might be voiceless and unable to articulate the issues in the way that I can, because I have the language.
So this is your most well-known work, and this is the part where I have to remind you, we do have books for sale. So at the end of all this, Lola will be signing books over there. How much are the books, Lucky Grace? 10,000, nearly 10,000 Rwandan francs. That's barely a cup of coffee at Bourbon. So I'm sure you can all afford it. If you already have the book, as I do, I suggest you buy another one so you can get her to sign your copy. And then you give away the one you have now to someone else so they can read the book, right? So everybody's buying a new copy of her book here this evening. I'm very fascinated with the number of lives this book is having. So we were speaking earlier about the fact that it's been turned into a one-woman play. It's also been turned into another play in the UK that has multiple, you know, full cast of characters. And then you dropped what I was hoping you would say, which is that this is going to be turned into a movie. So please tell us about that journey. And we can clap for that, by the way, that she wrote a book and the book's gonna be a movie. So I want to hear all about the journey of how do you go from this idea that you've been carrying for I don't know how many years to selling the rights.
It's probably a good thing to say that we haven't actually officially announced that it's been sold, but so yeah, you heard it here first.
See, this is why you come to Kigali Lit, guys, because you get all of the exclusive scoops. Yeah. So far we have discovered there's going to be an audio book, there's going to be a movie. I mean, by the time we leave here, we're going to find out all of her deepest, darkest secrets.
That's right.
So tell us about what's happening with the movie.
I'm one of those people who... I don't agitate to make things happen when I have kind of finished the work. Okay. So I've written it and I've left it, and it's just going to go on its own journey. And ever since it came out, various people have approached my agents and approached me about doing a film adaptation, which is always delightful. But I think I was looking for something and waiting for something. I wanted it to be, in my mind, my kind of fantasy was that it would be directed by a woman, an African woman. So a lot of the interest that we have has been from, you know, non-Africans. And I just really wanted it to be a story that was told in a believable way, but by an individual who understood the context. And that's basically what has happened. We've now arrived at that point where I've got a Nigerian woman at the helm of affairs who's going to be in charge of the proceedings following, you know, the announcement.
Whenever it comes, but you guys know first. So are you going to be involved at all, or have you just kind of signed over your rights and you're going to let it go?
I'm not involved in any of, you know, the new lives that I've had the privilege of seeing the book take on. Didn't know about Memuna. She just asked if she could, and I said yes. That's
the one-woman show?
Yeah, it's the one-woman show. The full cast adaptation that was in the UK, I'm very good friends with the director. He's a good friend of mine. And I did a read-through with them at some point, but that was the extent of it, because he wouldn't let me not. And that's it. I'm just not, there's nothing for me to add.
Really?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
So do you not have any fear at all about someone taking like your baby? Do you think of it as your baby, your book baby, and then doing something to it that compromises the vision that you had for this work?
Not really, because these things I think are about trust. So it's not about money. It's not about the production house. For me, it was just about somebody who understood the story. And that's all I was looking for, a Nigerian woman, preferably, who understood the story, understood the context of the book. What if I had 3 books? I mean, how many things can one person do? And that's how I've always looked at it. At some point, as a writer, you've just got to say goodbye and let it go.
I think that's really impressive, because most writers I've interacted with feel a very personal connection to their work, and they're really scared of anyone else tainting it. Something else that's really interesting to me is the fact that you have written in so many different formats. So you started out as a poet, and so I would love for you to tell us more about what was that journey of going from poetry to children's books to now to doing novels for a more adult audience.
I studied literature in school, in uni, and I started writing poems in my 4th year, and my lecturers seemed to think that there was something there. However, when I was 6 years old, I went to school in Edinburgh, and many people don't even know that Prince Charles actually wrote a book, the first son of the Queen. He wrote a book.
Anybody know that? No. I didn't know that. No.
He wrote a book called The Old Man of Lochnagar. Lochnagar is a place in Scotland, and he came to our school. So I had that opportunity to make the connection between a book and a writer very early on. So I didn't have that situation where I wasn't certain that it was something that I couldn't do. I always believed that it was something that I could do. And I knew that just from talking to people, I kind of felt that I was a bit of a storyteller. I was also a performer. And so I was kind of into drama, into declamation contests. The school would just wheel me out every time to, go and do. So I generally had an early... I engaged with books and with words quite early. So I started writing poem. My first collection came out in 1997. So all the time I was sitting on an egg, which I think is a feminist tract. It was very angry and doing everything I could to piss off Nigerian men. Which they absolutely deserved it. I think it worked. I mean, a lot of people called me shamed me as a feminist in those days, called me a lesbian, which I quite liked. Lots of that sort of feedback, but I kind of just took it all in my stride. So it was kind of the sort of thing that I did. I enjoy writing poetry very much. I think it's what comes most natural to me. I find this to be very hard work. Okay. I find the children's books to be even harder. But I guess at the end of the day, it's what drives you as a human being. Mm-hmm. So when I wrote Baba Segi, for instance, I'd written 2 other novels, but I couldn't find a publisher for my second novel, okay. Which was a historical novel called Harlot. And out of just sheer frustration when I couldn't find a publisher, my agent called me one day and said, Lola, I don't know what's going on. This is a great story. I don't know why writers and publishers keep telling us, look, we already have our own black author. We don't need another one. That's the sort of thing that we would hear. I would later meet Camilla, for instance, who's Jamaican. Yes. And when we approached a certain publisher, their answer was that we've already got Camilla.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine what the world was like. I was living in the UK at the time. So After, and my agent just said, why don't you try something else? Have you got another story? And I did have this story. I've had this story in my head since I was 14.
Wow.
Because it is based on a true story. And I just said, well, I do have one. Do you want to hear it? Like in 3 minutes. And she said, yeah. So I just kind of told her very briefly, like, told her about the book. And she said, you've got to write that book. So that's how the journey started.
Wow.
So I didn't feel there was like a formal kind of transition from, oh, I'm writing poetry now, I'm going to now write fiction. Nothing like that actually happened. It was very seamless because there would be times I would get really frustrated during the writing of this book. And the easy cure was to write a poem.
Gotcha.
So it was pretty
You're still
seamless.
doing all of those things. So
Yeah.
even now you're still writing poetry, still writing books.
I do still write poetry.
Okay.
It's not always very good, but yeah.
Do you
try.
feel as if the industry and society in general has evolved beyond that point of only allowing one black writer through the door at once, or do you still feel that frustration and that kind of pushback in your work?
It depends what society you're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about the West, I've stopped caring about how they feel. I'm more interested in how Africans feel, what's important to them, how their stories are getting written, how reading audiences are responding to African stories. I mean, that's what I'm interested in. The West has established its own institutions and structures as far as publishing goes, and as far as African stories go. They've, for too long, set the standards, dictated who we should read. And I think a lot of the work that I'm doing now, it's about saying no more. We will say who we want to read. We will create our own literary personalities, and we will worship them. We will stand and we will do all that, because that's what needs to happen. We've got to believe our own voices. We've got to believe in our own voices. So that's where I am on that.
That's clap-worthy, absolutely. Who does Lola Shoneyin stand for? Who are the writers that right now you get excited every time they publish something? You have to read everything they write.
Toni Morrison, Margaret Atwood, I love her. Isabella Allende, yeah.
What about I would love to hear some more, like maybe younger writers or less known writers from the continent who you think we should look out for?
Oh, well, that's a different question.
Yeah.
I would definitely say Ayobami Adebayo. I don't need to talk about Chimamanda, who's absolutely awesome. Some of my contemporaries have also, done amazingly. So Chika Onigwe, Adaobi Nwabani. Well, it's funny because they're all women. I actually favor writing by women. I'm not afraid to say it, but
Right.
I do have, if I have 2 books, woman written by, I'm just going for the one written by the woman.
Yeah.
It's just the way because I think we still have so much kind of catching up to do. And I also think that women's voices a lot of the time are more honest, in their assessment of the societies we live in and some of the issues. There's Oyinkan Braithwaite, who's just published My Sister, the Serial Killer.
I love that book.
Yeah.
It's a really amazing and hilarious book. Actually, now that you say that, I'm not surprised that you like that book because it does have that kind of dark humor, which I think your book also has. Yeah.
There's Zukizwa,
Yeah.
Zukizwa Vana. There's so many.
Okay.
Which is amazing, isn't it? That we've arrived at this place where I can't, I'm going to need like 3 or 4 sets of hands and fingers to be able, of fingers and toes to count these authors. There's so many, doing really great stuff. There's Hadiza El Rufai, who I've had the pleasure of publishing, who's written some really, a very interesting novel about northern Nigeria, which is a region that we often don't hear about or read about in fiction.
Okay, so I also want to just plug Who's again, because many of the authors that she mentioned, they do sell the books here in Kigali.
Brilliant.
So you can take a look, the back table. So you're done. After you're done buying her book and getting her book signed, then you can buy some more from what she just recommended you. Again, I was so amazed by the number of things you're doing. I don't understand how you are writing books for children and for adults and writing poems and running what at this point is Africa's biggest, I believe, literary festival, which is Ake. Then also doing another festival on top of that. Then you have your foundation. So how are you juggling all of these, your publishing house as well? How are you managing all of these different things, and how do you see them fitting all together? Like, what's the vision for all of these different things you're doing?
Great question. Well, if you look at the trajectory that my life's taken, the people who know me are never surprised about the different things that I'm doing now. And when you look at it also, they're all part of a larger ecosystem. So I started my journey as a writer. I wanted to be able to promote other writers. So I established a festival. I founded a publishing house when I was 23 years old, you know. Didn't do very well.
Nigeria?
In Nigeria.
Okay.
But just to kind of say how long that's many, many years ago.
But you're only 25, right? So
I am.
2 years ago?
It was just about, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. I started with that. How can I promote other writers? But a lot of it came from traveling as an author myself. And, you know, even when I would go to festivals in Europe, in America, to talk about my book, a lot of the questions would be around sort of polygamy, some of the cultural, you know, our culture, and how horrible it was and abhorrent, and how, you know, how it should be eradicated so that we could all be exactly like, you know, a certain type of individual who lives in another part of the world. Right. And I realized that it was very difficult for me to do, to attack. I mean, I can state, these are the facts about polygamy in my country. This is how I feel about it. But I'm not going to speak as if I don't understand the reasons why it exists. And it doesn't mean that every polygamist deserves to be killed.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the nuance is required. And of course, there's very little time. I mean, how much history can I give them?
Right.
So I then thought to myself, you know what? Yeah, polygamy is a bit of a shit institution. But if I want to address it, I should be talking to Nigerians. I should be talking to Africans, you know, who many of our cultures are still kind of happily engaging in polygamy, for instance, maybe without thinking of the psychological damage that it does to women who have to exist within that sort of competitive environment. So I wanted to bring our writers back to come and talk about their books, but to African audiences. So as soon as I started doing that, I then became inundated with people telling me, you know, we want to... it's the foundation that organizes the festival.
Right.
Yeah. So then it was like, oh, I have this book. How can I come to the festival? And I'll be like, where's the book? And then they bring me a manuscript. And I'm like, what? This isn't a book yet, you know? But you know what? I like what you told me about this book.
Right.
How about you give me a year to think?
Turn it into a book?
Exactly. So that was my journey, and it started with one of my authors, and it was just, you know, from then on, we've just kind of been publishing lots of books. So we publish the books, the authors can attend the festival and other festivals around the world. Yeah. So can you see how it's all interconnected? Yeah. So this is how I'm now talking to people like Louisa, talking about, okay, where do we've got these African publishers, this is us. How do we now connect the dots? How do we ensure that Rwandans have access to Nigerian books and Nigerians have access? So this is how the conversation and the things that one is involved in just gets broader and broader. Yeah. So it's not always kind of my, How
What should I do
much
next?
more can I do to fill up my already overflowing days? It's just that things happen and they have to be done.
Right.
So I don't think, I always tell people that I have obstacle blindness.
Okay.
When there's a problem and we need to solve it, you get stuck in and you solve it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't make excuses. I just want to see things happen.
Obstacle blindness. I'm making a mental note. I'm applying that to my. A lot of people, I think, just got a breakthrough from that particular phrase. We're moving into the rest of our lives with obstacle blindness. I want to come back to hear more about the books you've been publishing and to talk a bit more about the festivals. But I wanted to not forget what you said about the nuances that we're missing about polygamy, particularly as it's being practiced in Nigeria. And I'm wondering what would you say is the general message that you would like maybe your readers, especially non-Nigerian readers, to take away as far as our understanding of what polygamy means in your culture?
So the first thing that I hope people understand is that people tend to think it's a religious issue or it's a religious practice. But the fact is it's more cultural than religious, because there isn't one part of Nigeria, which is very complex, as you know, but also loads of it. We have over 300 ethnic groups and languages. We have, obviously, we've got Christianity, we've got Islam, we've got, you know, the people, we call it ATR, African Traditional Religions. You've got those who have no faith at all. Right. But when you look at the one thing that everyone has in common is probably polygamy. Okay. If you go back 2 generations, 3 generations, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single Nigerian whose great-grandfather wasn't a polygamist. Okay. So it's a kind of cultural thing. It was accepted. It's there. So then, but why does it still exist? Why do we think it's wrong? Is it Christianity? You know, the Christian beliefs? Is that enough for us to think, okay, let's jettison it? Are we asking ourselves why so many young women are opting for polygamy? And that's why I think with this book, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there with Donnalee. You understand that it's a choice that was made, but what is it that informed that choice? Right. So you've got to think of some of the kind of social issues. You've got to think sometimes about economic issues. And then you've got to think about the evil issue around just status and the fact that we still, many of our African societies, no matter how accomplished you are as a woman, if you're not seen to be under a man, married and, you know, bearing someone's surname, your accomplishments really don't mean very much. You know, so those are some of the issues that one has to kind of think about. So Donnaalee's journey is important, of course, not just because she makes that choice, but then when you look at her story as well and the trauma that she has experienced. So you look at what actually leads people to make the decisions that they make. What sort of arrogance leads a man to believe that with his one penis he can satisfy 4 women? Right. You know, it's right. Yeah, so it's things like that.
So, you know, you talked about these societal issues that matter to you, as well as the feminism, your feminism, and how that informs your work. I'm wondering, as a writer, how do you, do you infuse those things very naturally? Do you think it just comes out in whatever story you're writing? Or as you're writing, is there a point where you stop and think, have I conveyed something that I want to convey to my readers?
No, it doesn't actually cross my mind, because it doesn't need to cross my mind, because it's in my mind. Right. So everything that I say, everything that I write, a lot of time is kind of filtered through, you know, that
just the lens.
Yeah,
of who
that
you are.
lens, that prism it's who I am. So obviously it's just going to be my perspective, right, that I rely on. But I would like to say that I make a concerted effort to be feminist. I guess there was a time when I was doing that, but even then I wasn't sure about the name for it. I was just doing it because I felt it was right.
Right.
You know? So, and now, you know, I'm proud to be referred to as a feminist and as a lesbian. Yeah.
So we have here in Rwanda, obviously, people in this room that care about literature. We have Who's Our Press and other, publishing houses and literature companies emerging. But obviously, we still have a very nascent industry here as far as literature compared to Nigeria, where you have so many festivals that you yourself alone you have 2 just by yourself. That's how many literary festivals are in Nigeria, that people can have 2, right? So what advice would you give to people in Rwanda who are writers? Because we do have published authors here in this room, people that want to be writers, people that want to be like you, to be having a book that other people adapt and turn into a movie and all that kind of thing. What should they be doing right now?
I just want to put out a note of caution about being like me. Because I'm a very flawed individual. But beyond that, the reason I can do the things that I do is because, one, I have an unbelievable team behind me. I have people who've worked with me for 7 years in organizing these festivals. The festivals are an autopilot.
Okay.
The biggest role that I play is discovering new authors like Yolande, and just discovering talent. And I even have people like Zukizwa that I rely on to do that for me, to kind of scout for new authors. It's always exciting for me when I'm introduced to an author from a different African country. I immediately kind of want to bring them in to the family. So I want my people to get to know them. I want to talk about them. I want to feature them in our review and whatever it is that we're doing. If I had to give any piece of advice, to writers, I would say it's absolutely critical that you keep on improving on your craft. And keep on developing as a writer, because at the end of the day, this is about quality. It is about quality. So nobody's going to think, oh, just because you're just starting out, you should have won a prize, or we have to give you special consideration. No, we've got to push ourselves harder and produce top quality work that we're proud to share. So, that's it. It's quite a difficult thing to say. And I sound almost arrogant saying it.
Because the instruction is basically be a good writer.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want to be sold, put out a good product. Be a good product. So that's how I feel. In terms of Kigali Lit this is amazing. These little gatherings that are intimate and wonderful. I really like them. And I think the most effective way to grow reading and literature is to have lots of these little gatherings. And luckily we have technology now as well, which means that we can kind of get work out there. At least it's doing one thing for us, which is, I can read Dala, without having the hard copy, the physical book. I can, get the ebook. So these things advancements within technology mean that access is much better than it was 10 years ago. And we've got to be ready to exploit that to the max by shooting everybody who's into piracy of any sort. No, please don't do that.
This is the point where the police come in because
I'm just
Lola
joking.
Shoneyin is advocating for
advocating for
in the middle of
murder
Kigali
again
Public Library.
at a book
Did you say
event.
again? Is this something that you regularly do?
I have a thing for those these guys who are they just do so much to kind of destroy the industry. So it might not be a big problem here, but in Nigeria, it's a huge problem.
Oh, it's definitely a problem.
And,
I'm sure we have all gotten books on WhatsApp. Sometimes without you even asking.
People send me
just
my
send
own
it
book
yeah.
on WhatsApp.
Like, I know you like to read.
And I send them Nigerian curses because that's, yeah, I become a Yafemi, you know. 'Cause it's lots
And now
of
we
income.
know which character she's really like from the book.
Yeah.
She just let us know.
I have a, when I spoke to Louise earlier, she said she wanted me to read 2 parts.
Okay.
So I do have an Iyafemi.
Oh, it's great. Let's do it now.
Should we, is this a good time
Yes,
to do that?
yes, we're ready.
Okay, so I'm going to read it as Iyafemi. So this is, sorry. So Iyafemi is the 3rd wife, and she herself has had a very difficult life, a very difficult childhood. She's been abused and molested, and she begged to be part of this household. And of course, with Bolanle, the 4th wife, coming in, she feels like her position is now at risk, and you know things could go badly. So anyway. You tell me what you think about her afterwards. When a plan does not go right, you plot again. One day you will succeed. One day you will be able to damage the person who hurts you so completely that they will never be able to recover. I have told Segi this on several occasions. I keep telling her that we need to find a permanent solution, but she does not have wisdom. She says we should continue to humiliate Bolanle until she runs away. Let us cut her feathers, she says. Well, the bird has shown that she can fly without feathers. I knew we should have gone for her throat. We should have bled her into a hole in the earth. I have suffered too much in my life to let that rat spoil it all for me. So what if she's a graduate? When we stand before God on the last day, will he ask whether we went to university? No, but he will want to know if we were wise as serpents, because that's what the Bible says we should be. If we let Bolanle ruin us, then we will all have failed before God. I reject failure in Jesus' name. I will not fail. When Bolanle first arrived, I scrubbed her tongue with bitter leaf. I made her understand who was in charge in this house. I showed her the sting of hot peppers. If she comes to this world again, she will run if she hears the name Iyafemi. Let me tell you one of the things that I did. Laughter kills me when I think of it. I don't think she had been with us for a year when Baba Segi asked me to make Asho Ebi for the entire household. The neighbor's birthday was in 2 weeks' time, and he wanted us all dressed in the same fabric from top to bottom. I want you to look like queens, he said. I looked at him and wondered why, if he wanted wives that looked like queens, he married a woman that looks like a toad. Or is it that scrawny rabbit that nibbles at Bolanle's burrow? And that's Bolanle. Is that his idea of a queen? Being a graduate does not make you beautiful. I know true beauty, and it is in pale yellow skin. I was born darker than this, but I use expensive creams to make my natural beauty shine. Queens indeed. Anyway, on the day I went to collect the clothes, I came out of the house and heard Bantu's No More No Vernacular screaming from giant speakers on the neighbor's fence. I danced into the pickup, leaving the entire family waiting in the sitting room. The tailor store was only 20 minutes away, but I stopped at a few places. By the time I got home, even my sons were sweating from anticipation. I rushed into the sitting room, arms laden, and surrendered the pile of clothes on the stool by Iyasegi's feet. The witch sniffed the air around me. She must have picked up the scent on my thighs. I was waiting for the tailor to put finishing touches to your clothes, I said. Would you have preferred it if I came home without them? Isn't it wonderful that we will all be dressed the same? Sometimes I wish I could pat myself on the back. My cunning knows no bounds. For a few moments, Segi stared at the outfits. The children couldn't conceal their impatience. Mama, the clothes! Akin pretended to cough as he spoke, so his mother wouldn't think him wayward. Segi cocked her head with interest before reaching for the pile and placing it on her lap. The witch touched all the clothes before anyone, as if she wanted to render them secondhand. She fingered the plastic buttons and touched the threading before giving each outfit to its respective owner. One by one, everyone stepped forward. Segi told Iyatokwe to drop Bolanle's clothes by her bedroom door, and she said everyone should return to the sitting room in 30 minutes so we could head out for the party. I got dressed quickly and headed to the sitting room so I could see everyone come in. Segi caught me in the corridor as she came out of the bathroom. She ran her eyes over my outfit. Such beautiful gold thread. Such fine sequins, she said. Her throat was thick with fury. The tailor ran out of sequins when he started to sew yours. And then he said that the girl that sold them to him was in confinement. But if you want, let us exchange. I'll wear yours and you can wear mine. I even started to unzip my blouse at the side. She would be lucky if she could fit even just one of her breasts in my entire outfit. She hissed and turned into the bedroom. Baba Segi soon joined me after to inspect us the way he always did. As the children walked in, he looked with pride at the parade of red stars against royal blue. He nodded as his eyes went from face to face. Segi soon waddled in. Her dress resembled a pillowcase with long sleeves and a ruffled collar that extended all the way to her ears. That thick neck of hers is an embarrassment. If she always had to wear clothes with high collars, maybe she would eat less. Maybe she would stop grunting like a pig. Iyatokwe, for her part, looked no different from her 3 daughters. Did she not behave like them? Was she any cleverer than they were? I told the tailor to sew the skirt 2 sizes too big so that the blouse was baggy and without darts. The neck gaped and slid off one of her shoulders. As usual, she didn't say anything. She was more concerned about Bolanle, who had just emerged from her bedroom. Bolanle's outfit looked like it had been knocked together by a roguish hand. To be honest, I sewed it myself. I watched the tailor on a few occasions and made the skirts from the discolored ends that he did away with. Instead of the square meter that the rest of the wives received as headgear, Bolanle's head was bound by a bright purple strip of cloth about 8 inches wide. I don't even remember where the cloth came from. Her face was bland, as if there wasn't a single thought in her head. Who knows what the lizard was thinking anyway? Everyone stared at her. Iyatokwe drew her palm to her lips, but Segi's eyes began to twinkle. I knew she would like it. My husband finally asked me to stand up. You can trust me. I gave him the queen he asked for. My skirt was fitted and the slit rode just above my knee. My blouse was adorned with crystals and the darts shaped my figure and lifted my breasts. I was well accessorized too, matching court shoes and bag, coral beads at my wrists, and a large gold crucifix around my neck. It was a good day.
I am so ready for this audiobook. And I would also like to suggest that you need to actually play this character in the movie. Nobody else is going to bring this level of animation to her. I'm absolutely certain of it. I think this is a great point to actually open up for questions from the audience. I know that many of you have read the book and are familiar with Lola's other works. So now's the time. If anybody has any questions, I knew Louise would be first because I'm sure she has about 15 questions to ask.
I'll make mine really, really quick. Because I was thinking about it when I read this book. I suppose what I wanted to get away from it, to get away with when I read this book was that, feeling that this Baba Segi man is a very bad man who's taken these women and sort of put them in this context where they're constantly competing with each other. But you actually come away feeling sorry for him and you like him. Was that intentional? Listening to you talk about, some of your previous work, some of your feminist writing, I thought that would be what you would want people to take away from it. So I wondered why that was not the case and why that was the way that you approached Baba Segi's character.
Well, because life is never simple, is it? It's not. People, even the people who are evil, the most evil people did not arrive at that point without a journey. And I actually really like Baba Segi. And the reason I like him is that he's a damn good father to his children. And that happens to be something that I just respect so much. It's when I see it in my country, it just warms my heart because they're going against the grain. Sometimes it feels like the direction our men are going into are to be slightly more aloof about raising children. More and more, as people get busier and busier, it's being pushed into kind of the domain of the women. But in spite of the fact that this wasn't an educated man, he was a great dad. He respected his children and he loved them. So that was important to me. He didn't set out to hurt anyone. What happened just happened. I'm being careful because there are people here who might not have read the book, so I don't want to reveal what's happening at the end.
Those people are all buying the book now, after we finish here. Other questions? People are so shy. This is a first. Darla, I know you have a question. Marie-Ange, I know you have a question. I'm going to go to Darla because she's a writer, and I feel like all the writers have to ask other writers writerly things.
She's actually right. My question is very selfish. It's you talked about becoming a better writer, and my simple question is there something that you can tell us that people don't always tell us about improving your skill? I mean, people say always read and write. Is there something else? Because there are so many times you can read and write and still stay at the same level.
Live the hell out of the one life you have so that you actually yourself gather experiences and understand people. If you're writing about human beings, it's really important to understand how they tick, what makes them tick. So, and one of the best ways, so there's reading, number one. Reading in a way that means you're being analytical about your characters, about the words you're reading, about the, what's being said, how it's being said, who they're saying it to, trying to kind of yourself almost put together the jigsaw that the author was trying to create, trying to put the pieces together. But live, I mean that. I mean, go out, talk to people, be sociable, and to observe people as well. At a party, watch, check them out, create stories in your mind, But yeah, just live. Go out and live. You can't write about certain things. You can't write convincingly about a friendship, for instance, or about friendship, unless you've experienced a deep one. But even unless you've experienced one that you valued that became hugely disappointing, so you have to kind of have the entire spectrum. So that's the sort of thing I'm talking about.
Do you think that writing is an innate talent, that some people are born with it and some are not? Or does everyone have the ability to become a good writer?
No. Not everyone, I think, can become a good writer. The same way not everyone can be a good carpenter. And I am one of those people who will never be good at sewing, knitting, crocheting, whatever. I'm useless at those things. I think it's important that people kind of understand where their skills lie. It starts in school, and sometimes it's life that teaches you. Sometimes it's necessity. Sometimes it's hunger, But the important thing is to be able to discover it. There are a lot of people who want to be authors because they see the glamour and what they perceive to be the glitz. So authors, you're famous, you're in the newspaper, people are interviewing you, there's this, there's that, there's... I don't know of a lot of writers who are on that side of the fame who actually are savoring it because it's exhausting, But what people see is what they see. And therefore, I have people who send me messages on Facebook saying, I want to become a writer and I need a mentor. So I ask them, okay, what have you written? Nothing. I just think I could be a good writer. So what are you meant to say to that? So I just say, okay, maybe go and write something, attend workshops. I totally refuse to mentor anyone because I don't have the time. I would do a crap job. But, reminding them of the things that they need to do. So I kind of have that on my desktop. I just copy and paste it all the time. Yeah. This is the fastest way to move on. So I definitely don't think writing is innate to everyone. I believe that people have different talents. I believe that hard work can get you to a certain point. But I think there are people who are natural storytellers, and such people find success in a way that can come across as being easy. But it's because they have flair. You're a teacher. You understand what I mean. You know how you can get a student to get an A, but they will never get that A star unless they have flair. Yeah. So that's where the natural bit comes in.
You spoke about how you favor writing by women, so yay. I'm wondering whether you have some of those few special men whose writing you like, whose books you would recommend for reading.
I think that's a very unfair question. You putting me on the spot like that, and as it so happens, I can't think of any.
Not a one. There's not a single male.
Not even one. No, obviously. I mean, I love my African brothers who are writing. People like Helon Habila, Odafe Atogun, Kola Tubosun. The ones I love are actually largely poets. I think the poetry from men is generally quite strong. So, yeah, well, sorry to disappoint.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm here.
Hi.
Yes, so I decided to be an active participant. I will contribute to the discussion. So, first of all, I really want to appreciate you, everything you've shared. I feel like you really kept it real. I refuse to believe that you're a vengeful person. So I'm not going to ask a very specific question about the book because, as you mentioned, some people may not have read it. I read it about, I think, 3 years ago. And my memory of it is that I kept gasping. Like, as each story unfolded, I was like, oh my God, no. There's no way this is happening. Oh, I knew this was coming. Oh, no. So my question is this close to reality? or did you have to think way outside the box? Like, are these common stories that you're hearing on your day-to-day? Could it have happened to someone you know, or you're just a really creative writer?
I wish I was just a really creative writer. The story itself is based on a true story. It happened when I learned about this when I was 14. I have a student, my brother had a girlfriend called Anne that I think in our family, I think I probably loved her the most. And the reason I loved her, she was a medical student. She would come to my house and just tell me all these stories, blood and gore and operations and how they opened people up and what came out, and you should have seen the blood. And I'll just be like, tell me more. Oh my God, so good. But anyway, so she then one day came and said, God, Lola, I have to tell you what happened at the hospital. But before I tell you what happened today and this man and what we found, I have to tell you what happened 2 weeks ago. So I said, okay. So she started to tell me the story. And as soon as I heard that story, I wanted to write it. I didn't know what, I wanted to write it as a play because I wanted to have a play that so I'd been reading Lola Shoneyin's The Lion and the Jewel, which, where you have a lot of sexist men. And I was just thinking to myself that, okay, is this my future in Nigeria? Is this what's been prepared for me? To be someone who lives for a man, who exists to please men. So when I heard this story, I just thought to myself, this is pretty cool. This is women taking control. And so that's why it was so attractive to me. And that's where I got the original story from. So the rest of it is all obviously kind of filling in the gaps. I didn't know, I never met the people it happened to. It was 3 wives he had, not 4. But I had issues I wanted to tackle. So religion, fundamentalist Christian, Pentecostal religion and the potential damage that it does in my country. I wanted to look at depression as well and how people who are depressed will often make the wrong decision. Because it feels right at the time. I wanted to look at homosexuality. A lot of people miss it, but Segi, the way she was looking at the buttocks of the tomato seller. I was actually trying to say something there. I don't know if people, okay.
We're going to reread that.
Yeah, oh my, you missed it? Okay.
I don't remember discussing that part, but I think we missed it.
Oh, but the point with that for me was, a lot of the arguments that we're having, the debates on the continent about homosexuality, for instance, and about people saying that it's un-African and that it's a Western construct. I've been having those conversations way before. So I wanted to have a character who had had 0 exposure to the West, but then to be like that, because that's how I had known homosexuality to be. Yeah. Within the communities that I was familiar with. So that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. And also with Iyatokbe, it was just how people can sometimes be different. And just because they're different, people condemn them and just kind of say, they're useless. And I wanted to kind of make a hero or a heroine out of such a character, which is why I wrote her that way. So, you have the skeleton, the frame, the skeleton of the book. No, not my original story, but then all the other bits, I don't even know if I can say they're all mine, but these are things I've heard. There's so much in there that's like from my mom's life, from my dad, from just things I've heard throughout my life. Yeah. Made them mine.
So, we are winding down, but there are just a couple final questions I want to ask before the book buying and signing begins. So as we mentioned, as many of you know, Lola is behind Africa's biggest literary festival, which is the Ake Festival. It's coming up in October.
October 24 to 27.
And I want you to just tell us what we can expect, because this is a very dynamic multicultural audience. We have Nigerian and German and Rwandan and Ugandan. I see Kenyan, I see Canadian. There are people in here that can buy tickets.
Oh, great.
They might just buy a ticket if you sell this well enough. So just really quickly tell us what happens at this festival.
So this festival is a celebration of creativity on our continent. And I like to believe that we make a huge effort every year to bring together the best minds, the most exciting speakers, but also to talk about some of the books that have touched us. So you will hear at this, you will hear the kind of conversations that you probably don't often hear on the continent. And I'll just give you an example. So we have a panel this year that's called The Gender Binary and Everything in Between. So this is, so people, you know, we've kind of, over the last 7 years, we've been able to have some really interesting conversations about things that people are uncomfortable with. But I happen to feel that discomfort is healthy, you know? It's healthy for growth, and it's healthy for, you know, understanding other perspectives, which then leads to tolerance. So that's, I'm always thinking about that. So we're always kind of pushing the boundaries, trying to have conversations around governance, around women, around a whole host. We have Alama Banku coming, Abdurrahman Waberi, Bernardine Evaristo, Temi O, Mona El Tahawi. It's such, we have 100 writers.
Nicole Dennis Ben.
Nicole Dennis Ben.
I have to shout out the Jamaican on the line.
Yes. So we've got writers, we've got filmmakers, we've got journalists, we've got thinkers. So yeah, it's, and we take on, so we have one, another one, for instance, called the, I forget what it's called, but we're talking, we want to talk about skin color, you know, so we're looking at what is, so we've got this young woman, Rennie Edo Lodge, who wrote the book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Then we have Mfo, I forget his surname, who's a South African albino, who will be on that panel. And then we have Gavin Evans, who's an English author who spent a lot of time in South Africa, and all his life's work has just been about skin, like almost like the conspiracy of, you know, differentiating or deciding that, you know, people of different skin colors have to be treated differently. So with these guys on a panel, and the person who's going to interview them or moderate that session is half Nigerian, half English. So you kind of have the entire spectrum, which hopefully reveals how, even when we're talking about race and color, skin color, it's very messy and very complex.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I have many more questions I could ask you, but it is a Saturday night and people are still trying to go to other places. And I know our lovely friends at the Kigali Public Library who are hosting us also need to go and do other things. But you have taken us on such a journey this evening that I really appreciate. I feel like we got such a sense of your creative process, both as a poet and as an author, as well as a festival creator and curator and as a publisher. And I'm still so impressed by just the scope of what you're doing. And so my last question to you is, can you share with us what is the big goal you're trying to accomplish? What is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
I live in a country where there are states where only 5% of the children can, 5% of the girls between the ages of 5 and 16 can read. 5%. And I have a 91-year-old father who has kind of fallen off the wagon because he was a real gadget man growing up. Every gadget he got, and he's just been thrown by the Android phone that has no buttons. He just cannot cope. And I've seen how what it's told me, and this is, he's a civil engineer, trained in the UK. So this is not somebody who doesn't understand technology, but I've seen how the speed with which the world is moving has left him behind. Yeah? And then we have these children who have no access to books. What life and what sort of existence are such children going to have in 20 years' time? So that's what keeps me up at night. That's why I'm writing the children's books. Because I actually went to northern Nigeria feeling very happy with myself and took lots of books authored by English authors, children's books, and I was reading to these children who had never seen picture books. And as soon as I started reading and they were looking at me and looking at the characters, I thought, this doesn't make any sense to them because they can't see themselves in the book. Right. You know, they're not familiar with a rhinoceros, you know, they've never seen one. It doesn't mean anything. Right. So that's why I decided I had to write books set in northern Nigeria so that these kids could see themselves in the characters, and hopefully that would help them want to engage with books, want to read, want to write, and hopefully they'll have a chance when we're all swept away by the wave of technology. So it's nothing particularly noble. It's just, I worry because when they're not educated and when they don't have skills, we're already seeing how they become fodder for Boko Haram and for extremist groups. And I'm just terrified that I'm going to have a country that my own children cannot live in. So it's all sorts of things like that.
There's a love of literature, but also the love of family and the love of your country as well.
There's a love of my country, love of my continent, wanting my continent to kind of stop being a basket case, wanting, you know, just kind of looking to help create a world where people have opportunities. I think that's just it, you know, where they're equipped with skills that mean when the opportunity comes, they can make the most of it, rather than just sitting down and not knowing what to do.
I feel that's a really beautiful note to end on, and it's also a place where I could start a whole other conversation as somebody that works in education. But I hope that we can carry that with us in all our different fields of endeavor, like this desire to help create better opportunities in the world. And one way that we can do that is by supporting people like Lola who are actively doing the things that help to create these spaces that we want for our children and for our children's children. Such a tender note to end on. It's been so lovely to speak with Lola. Let's put our hands together for her. So as we are coming towards a close, again, I really, really want to thank the good folks of the Kigali Public Library who give us this space. I always feel really nervous doing events right here because I think of a library as a very quiet, sacred, serious space. And here we are laughing and, you know, on microphones. But, you know, thank you so much to KPL for giving us this space, allowing us to use it. Again, we have to shout out the Growth Institute, who continues to be a major sponsor and supporter of the arts. You can wave to us, Katerina. Ake Festival, this is a side event of, they're continuing tonight at the Kigali Genocide Memorial. We will be back there tomorrow at 2 with Lola again, as well as with South African spoken word poet Libo, who many of you heard at Spoken Word Rwanda on Wednesday. So we're going to be talking a lot about the Ubuntu theme of, you know, using truth through literature to tear down walls, to tear down oppression. So feel free to come back at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Make sure you are following Lola Shoneyin on Instagram, on Twitter, so you can know about all the wonderful things she's doing. You can hear more about Ake Festival. And Who's Our Press? See all their lovely social media there. If you want to know about other great literary events happening, please make sure you're tweeting, Instagramming, Facebooking with them, and that way you will not be left out of the loop when other exciting events happen. Now I have 2 more things I want you to do, then we're gonna go. The first thing is dig into your pocket for your 10,000 Rwandan francs so you can purchase your book for yourself, for your friend. I don't know when you're ever going to see Lola again to get your book personally autographed, you know. If there's someone that you need to buy a gift for, there's someone who's mad with you, this is a great way to make it up to them. Get her to write a lovely note in the book. This is a rare opportunity, guys. So please make sure you have your 10K ready. And then to end, I want to ask you to do something I always ask people to do. Put your right hand up. Put your left hand up. Now give yourselves a round of applause. You have been a really, really awesome audience. This has been Kigali Lit, an evening with Lola Shoneyin. Thank you so much for coming, and have a good night. See you at the next Kigali Lit. Is this your first time in Rwanda?
No, I've passed through quite a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Earlier when we were talking, you spoke about how much you loved Rwanda. I just wanted to get some impressions from you about Rwanda as a visitor.
I absolutely love Rwanda because it's clean, you know, and everything seems to be so well organized. I love it. I really do. You know, I could live here, and it does make me sad a little bit when when you come to another African country, you can't help but compare it to your African country. And I just think I would like to see Nigeria take a leaf from Rwanda's book. I would like to have drainage by the roadsides. I just want things
Cleanliness,
to work.
general cleanliness.
Yeah.
Okay, and so my last question for you is, what do you think the world can learn from Nigeria? I think, because Nigerians are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
You guys are everywhere. Everybody knows your energy and your vibrancy. But what could we learn that we probably don't often think of when we think of Nigeria?
Well, I think, I mentioned earlier that we have over 300 ethnic groups. That's a lot of ethnic groups in a small space. So people tend to talk about maybe 3 or 4 of them, like the major ones. But in spite of the fact that we have so many, we do have conflict. And we do rub each other up the wrong way.
Right.
But I think there's a lot to be said for actually just being able to kind of toddle along as a country. So I think a lot of the resilience that people sometimes misinterpret as, being forceful. I think that perhaps they don't appreciate what's informed that behavior.
Right.
And it's having to cope with a lot of basically having to create your own basic amenities where government has failed.
Right.
And that comes with a certain feeling of authority, because after all, you're your own government. So there's a sense in which that makes you self-assured, because
Right.
you're achieving things. You have a need, you're fulfilling it, you're succeeding, you are filling in the gap. You are doing what perhaps government or the state ought to be doing. And I think that means that people just, self-assured, and that's the message I'd like to. That's the kind of thing I'd like to say to the world. I think we get a bad rap sometimes. I think people should love us.
I agree. I think Jamaicans are the Nigerians of the Caribbean, so
That's what they
I'm
say.
on the same
You
wavelength with
understand.
I understand.
You
Thank
understand.
you so much.